The race is on around the world to develop a vaccine for coronavirus. The Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, which is sponsored by several philanthropic foundations and governments, is funding programs at 3 centres. Well, at one of them, the University of Queensland in Australia, researchers have already identified one possible candidate for a vaccine, although research is at a very early stage. Well, leading the vaccine team there is Paul Young, Professor of Virology and also head of the School of Chemistry at the University of Queensland. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Professor Young, I appreciate you're at early stages at the moment, but can you tell us where you are with this search within your team to find a possible vaccine?
Absolutely, and good morning here. We began our program of research, or at least vaccine search, the day that we received the information from China of the sequence of the virus. That was back in 11th of January. And within 3 weeks, we had gone through about 250 different versions of our particular approach to vaccine generation before we selected the lead candidate. So that lead candidate, which we're intending to take all the way through, is now already in preclinical animal studies to determine what immunity it can actually elicit in animals. And ultimately, we'll be testing that in other animal studies of disease to look at whether we can protect those animals. And with that, we will be moving into human clinical studies, phase 1 clinical studies, probably around about the end of June.
Now, we know that when it comes to, say, regular influenza flu vaccines, they're not 100% effective. It's difficult to get such a vaccine to work. Explain to us the challenges that you and the team are under to develop something for something like coronavirus.
Well, I think we're probably not under the same sort of challenges that vaccine manufacturers have with influenza, which drifts and changes quite dramatically from year to year, and that's why we need to make new vaccines each year. Coronaviruses don't mutate as rapidly as influenza, and so the vaccines we're designing and utilising now for this coronavirus is likely to last for quite some time and be effective. Many vaccines that are in use, apart from influenza, which has those problems, as I mentioned, have efficacy rates that are very high, that are in the 80 to 90% efficacy. So we've got absolute confidence that we'll be able to generate a vaccine that provides strong protection to the majority of those receiving it.
And I guess the million-dollar question is when? By when do you think?
Look, the rule book has gone out with regards to this outbreak. Obviously, people are trying to accelerate development as fast as they can. I'm sure you've heard many people comment before that the typical pathway for a vaccine, it can be anything like 10 to 15 years. Many people have been talking about accelerating that to 12 months to 18 months. But we're even now starting to try and accelerate that given the scale of the outbreak. You may have heard overnight that one of the other groups funded by CEPI to advance a vaccine have already started their clinical trial. Their first human vaccinee has been vaccinated overnight. That's absolutely unheard of to have moved that quickly. They've moved into clinical studies before the preclinical work in animals have been completed, and that just shows the level of concern everyone has. From our own perspective, what we're considering doing is advancing manufacturing. So normally what happens is you wait till you determine whether your vaccine works effectively in your clinical studies, and it's only then you begin to ramp up the manufacturing for dissemination and deployment. We're starting to think about trying to get funding to advance manufacturing at the same time we're doing the preclinical and clinical studies, so that we will have a vaccine ready at scale when we know that it's past those clinical studies. So everyone's thinking of new ways of accelerating that pipeline.
Professor Young, I think I'd be stating the obvious by saying that there are an awful lot of people rooting for you and the team. Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you very much.